Good morning. This morning I was trying to learn handstands. Look. We're we're wrapping up the inattentive personality thing. Okay, so that means today that we're covering 2 paragraphs, and then we're going back and reading my initial hypothesis, looking at what I got right and how I did and stuff. Also drinking some coffee. Just scheduled to take my car into Discount Brake and Muffler. It's having some problems with the shock is like messed up or something. So yeah, sorry, I won't dilly-dally. Let me get the essay open. This is my bad, guys. This is my bad. He'll give us what we need. Just to reiterate, today we are covering what develops dissociative disorders, and then we're going to be talking, which is pretty much, you need to watch the video before this if you're just watching this without it. So we're covering dissociative disorders and trauma and how that works with your brain, and then we're talking about people that suffer from inattentive personalities and their correlation to being drug addicts. Sorry, I don't really do like a quote when I'm reading a quote, by the way, so I hope you can tell when I'm like quoting and stuff. Like if I say page 10, this author, blah blah blah, then you know I'm quoting something, okay? As mentioned earlier, there are roughly 3 criteria that will differentiate the level of withdrawal of the mind based on the trauma suffered. When these traumas go beyond ADHD-inducing levels in a child, they create higher levels of inattentiveness adaptations that are classified under mostly under dissociative disorders. Of course, no one is in a state of entire vacuity, as seen in severe dementia or Alzheimer's cases at such a young age. The patient may suffer maladaptation, but brain function doesn't fully cease, only partially. Dissociative identity disorder, dissociative amnesia, depersonalization/derealization disorder, specified dissociative disorder, and other unspecified dissociative disorder are the results of the withdrawal of the inner world due to childhood trauma. When the trauma is suffered as an adult, the result is different. Such circumstance will be touched on later. All these disorders that result in abnormal brain function are closely tied to levels of childhood trauma objectively viewed as the worst degrees of psychic damage. Victims of sexual and physical abuse, kidnappings, witnesses of terrorism, and various acute and chronic traumas at a young age, 5 to 10 roughly, 5 to 6 specifically for the case of dissociative identity disorder according to the DSM-5. That is what makes someone likely to develop these disorders. All these disorders manifest their differing forms of abnormal brain function, implying withdrawal of the psyche, typically seen as flashbacks, switching between differing minds or identities, experiencing withdrawal from the physical body. Patients with these disorders are frequently seen spacing out, dramatically shifting personalities and styles of thought, and as a result of these two, forgetting significant details. All disorders on the umbrella of dissociative disorders are extremely impactful to day-to-day function of the patient. Dissociation is a process linked to lapses of attention, history of abuse or trauma, compromised emotional memory, and a disintegrated sense of self. It is theorized that dissociation stems from avoiding emotional information, especially negative emotion, to protect a fragile psyche, according to Oates and Ray in 2009. One cannot run forever from the information hidden in the unconscious. Jung explained the recovery of forgotten memories well in Man and His Symbols, explaining that a smell reminding a man on a walk of his childhood, reminded him of his childhood on a walk. I need to rephrase that. Which caused him to discover forgotten memories of instances that occurred at an early age. Just because a memory is forgotten does not mean it cannot reemerge into the psyche. Often this reemergence is what would be considered a post-traumatic stress flashback. Patients suffering from these disorders are extremely likely to be suffering from severe traumas and thus They will return to the sensation of the moment that they were traumatized as if experiencing it again following some reminder. This reemergence is what theoretically causes the depersonalization, which is an out-of-body experience. What just happened? What just happened, bro? Okay, sorry. However, at other times, it is random and not due to remembrance, but rather the state of vacuity. Vacuity means a lack of thought. It means like an empty consciousness. A person is suffering from these conditions finds himself in. Thus, we can draw the importance of recovering such, integrating them into consciousness through employing various methods. For encountering unconsciousness, such as shadow work, dream analysis, and psychoanalytical assessment. As it is necessary for recovery, and will prevent sudden flashbacks and methods used to prevent sudden flashbacks and methods used to prevent the thought of the occurrence through conscious awareness of the trauma. Sorry, that wasn't really phrased very well. What I'm saying is that in order for these patients to properly recover, they have to consciously figure out what happened and be aware of it so that they're not doing the thing where, because pretty much what happens is with depersonalization, things like this, they're kind of gone. And then, like, either they're experiencing a post-traumatic flashback or they're literally just out of their body, just disconnected. So if we can make them consciously aware and keep them within that state, not so that they forget it again, then there's not as much potential for flashbacks and things like that. This is theory, okay? This isn't like actual praxis. The child with attachment. Whoa. Well, this is the difference between the trauma responsive and inattentive ADHD and those with dissociative disorders, and the attentive ADHD patient and those with dissociative disorders. The child with attachment trauma blocks the development of understanding of others' thoughts among various other mental skills to avoid suffering the truth. The dissociative can learn these things but will lack proper brain function theoretically due to the suffering inflicted by unadulterated thought. As mentioned, these disorders are on a spectrum, and the placement on the spectrum is decided by the severity of the trauma. On a lower level, one may zone out periodically throughout the day, forget details, and feel out of body. Each of these disorders is complex and hard to diagnose and differentiate, as they are linear in effect, and due to the nature of the mind of patients afflicted by these, they are hidden. The reason the brain adapts to develop these disorders is to hide certain aspects of the mind because they cannot be properly thought of. A child that was raped cannot properly imagine why someone would do that, nor can they understand the true essence of what happened. They will try repeatedly, and the mind will eventually shift to hide the fact that it ever occurred, as it causes overt suffering and cannot be truly reconciled with. So, the mind disinhibits mentalization at a high level, and at times all real thought, causing dissociative amnesia, an aspect of all dissociative disorders. Some dissociative states are similar to a fugue, often understood by the layman as highway hypnosis, which means... Okay, so what is a dissociative fugue? A patient is found 30 kilometers from his home. I'm referencing. This isn't an exact quote, okay? A patient is found 30 kilometers from his home after leaving early in the morning without telling his mother. He's found on the side of the road and looks disheveled multiple days later. They ask him why he left. He says, "I don't know. I just woke up and my house didn't look the same and somehow I got here." Right? A dissociative fugue means that you go somewhere and you don't remember why you went there, how you got there, and now you're just in a different place and you're very confused. High levels of dissociation, which is dissociative identity disorder, are described in patients by author Pierre Janet in The Major Symptoms of Hysteria, the first real psychologist to teach about dissociation. This is a quote, it's very long. After some interruption, she again had fits of the same odd delirium. In these crises, she runs on all fours, roars. Okay, sorry. When I pasted this, I was taking it from a very old book, and it didn't put in any of the punctuation, so it's gonna sound a little weird. In these crises, she runs on all fours, roars, rushes on people trying to bite them, and although she was anorexic before her attack and could eat very little, she now pounces on all sorts of food and picks it up with her teeth, and devours bits of paper and small objects she finds on the floor. In a word, she acts a comedy wherein she believes herself to be a lioness. I say that she acts a comedy, for it becomes certain that she studies her part, and that she often replaces real actors by metaphors. For instance, she looks in a drawer for photographs, generally children's portraits, and tries to eat them up. Without any doubt, she is unable to devour real persons, and she devours them in effigy. I will insist on the form here borrowed, from page 28. Thus, we obtain the truth of variety of inattentiveness. People do not consciously choose this route. It is merely measures taken to protect the mind. Of course, they aren't ideal, because there are neurological shift that automatically occurs due to trauma. Now, what is the manual shift that occurs due to trauma? Let me make a note. That is like, I've read 10 times worse cases on DID. This is the stuff that disturbs me so much, dude, when I read about dissociative identity disorder, because I'm just like, oh, this is unreal. You know? And I wouldn't consider myself to be someone who's easily disturbed. Like, I read a lot about, No, it makes it so much worse than I know about Project Monarch, bro. It makes it like 10 times more depressing. Anyways. Second paragraph of this section. Self-induced running from traumas, substance abuse. Quick note, of course, other methods are used to cope with traumatic responses, such as meditation, grounding, and therapy. This discussion is focused on negative coping mechanisms. Substance abuse, also commonly described as self-medication, is the change of the ability to think, the vacuity that is chosen rather than forced by the mind. That is the difference lining substance abuse compared to inattentiveness. Inattentiveness is forced, substance abuse is chosen. When I say inattentiveness, guys, I'm again referring to the idea that I explained earlier, that people develop varying levels of inattentiveness based on how terrible the trauma was. So, problems with your mother, you weren't cared for properly as a child, maybe you were adopted, maybe you were in the foster system, you're going to develop ADHD to be unable to properly understand why that would happen. Or like, maybe you start to dissociate because you watch someone die, right? But then if you get like sexually abused, then you're going to be more likely to develop a dissociative identity disorder, where you're shifting, you create multiple identities to carry different pieces of the truth because you can't bear it all within one psyche. Within that notion, we find the traumatized patient often turns to anything that can remove them from their heads, and such is easily and most commonly done with drugs. Furthermore, the inattentive are significantly more likely to turn to drugs. Regardless of the fact that the brain has adapted its intrapsychic processes, often individuals who suffered from trauma seek to further distort their ability to think. We'll move first through ADHD, which we have already correlated to childhood attachment trauma, then to dissociative disorders and comorbidity with substance use, which will be referred to as SUD. Substance use disorder, sorry. ADHD creates personalities likely to abuse substances in and of itself with a high novelty-seeking trait, which means that you enjoy new experiences a lot more than most people. You're seeking new experiences more often. High novelty. What does novelty mean? New, nice, okay? You're seeking that. Combined with compulsion, lack of impulse control, lack of focus, and hyperactivity. All these traits are caused also tied to a lack. Okay, I meant to say all these traits are both tied to a lack of the development of the prefrontal cortex, right hemisphere, but also they're all tied to tendencies that lead people to abuse substances. In addition to this, both ADHD and SUD have heavy types of trauma, specifically childhood trauma. The prevalence of ADHD and SUD was noted in a work, Adult Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder and Substance Use Disorder. A systemic review of the literature by Lies. I don't even know, bro. I don't know how to say it. I think it's ILJES with this thing on top of the S. In 2020, stating that's what we're going to be referencing for this entire section, which is it's like 5 pages.
Powering off.
One of the most frequent co-occurring disorders with adult ADHD is substance use disorder. A meta-analysis reported a prevalence of 15 to 20% of ADHD in adults diagnosed with substance use disorder. Comparatively, SAMHSA, this is in a different country, okay? The literature that they're reviewing is, I believe that the one that I was just referencing was in Sweden, which has the highest ADHD rates. And this SAMHSA is the same year, but it's in the US. The SAMHSA found 14.3% of the general population to have substance use disorder, including nicotine. In the same year, in the 2020 National Survey on Drug Use and Health. A number of factors can cause someone to be at risk for substance use disorder, all pertaining to bad mental health. I hate this idea of like mental health. Dude, this is the thing, is that the liberalism ruined it for me. So now it's just like it makes me mad and stuff. But okay, sorry, that's off topic. We can derive the fact that the adaptation that the brain makes to avoid the trauma resulting in inattentiveness was not effective enough to prevent the negative symptoms of the suffered trauma. I would theorize this to be due to the unconscious mind still holding the results of the trauma, although unaccessed, still resulting in negative feeling and perceptions. I've discussed the fact that your unconscious mind holds literally everything that you've forgotten. It's regardless of if you're consciously able to access memory, right? It still has the results. And the whole island analogy in the Damon video, the Damon is great for understanding this stuff, bro. Like the unconscious strings that are being pulled to lead these people to do these things, and they just want to feel good. But then that creates this unconscious, I say Damon, it's like demon, right? And I'm not talking about religion here, I'm talking about actually in your mind. You want to do so good, but there's this unconscious beast within you that's like, do this. And now hoes are cutting themselves and stuff. Like, it's terrible. Okay, sorry, that was out of hand, but back to what I was saying. This theory is supported by also, that was not the study that I'm going to be referencing the whole time. The study that I'm referencing the whole time is the study done in substance use disorder treatment centers in Turkey, Karadag et al. 2005. That's going to be the one that's being referenced this whole time. It's Karadag. They conducted a study in an inpatient facility for addiction treatment in Turkey, screening for dissociative disorders. The facility was the best in the country and thus had the referrals of those who needed the most assistance. All subjects in the study were not in a state of withdrawal with a mean of 24.9 days without using a substance. Therefore, withdrawal symptoms causing dissociation can be ruled out. The patients took the Turkish adaptation of the DES, which is the Dissociative Experiences Scale. It's an instrument for measuring dissociation, found to be very reliable. Specifically, the Turkish version is supposed to be very good, which I just thought was hilarious. I was trying to access the actual document itself, and all I found was like 5 different things writing about how great the Turkish adaptation is. The average score of an adult is 5.4. High dissociation levels are found at 30, with a maximum score of 100. The average score of a person with dissociative identity disorder is 48. Which is on I'm speaking this from the DES American version, which is the second version of it. It's like a little adaptation from 2024. The study found the mean DES score of the original 215 patients was 24.5 with a standard deviation of 17.5. Meaning the average person in this treatment study was excluding a few epileptics, retards. I don't say that like I say retards sometimes. I mean this is in the literature. This is a quote. Okay, so chill out. Illiterates and people with acute psychotic disorders and those with cognitive deficits. So that means the average person was near high levels of dissociative qualities. In addition to this, the female patients scored an average of 12.4 points higher than their male counterparts. A negative correlation was found with score and age, which I think is interesting. We'll talk about theory later. 36.7% of patients had scored 30 or higher. Following the first phase of the trial, the second group was 112 patients. All those with scores 10 to 30 were dropped from the trial. In the second group, another test was taken to measure symptoms. The SCID brought about the diagnosis as having a dissociative disorder being 52.4% of the patients who scored over 30 on the DES initially. It also diagnosed 4 patients who scored under 10. The mean score of patients was not diagnosed with a disorder. The mean score of patients who were not diagnosed with a dissociative disorder was 22.8. This demonstrates the fact that even without a dissociative disorder, substance use disorder is highly correlated to dissociative, which are inattentive, traits. You see how much grounds I just got? Not good. Symptoms of those with dissociative disorders were measured, and the most commonly suffered symptom was dissociative amnesia, with a rate of 75.7, which further proves my point earlier that dissociative amnesia is the hallmark of dissociative disorders. Dissociative patients were found to be significantly more likely to seek several drugs than just one, with only 27% of them using only alcohol compared to 58.7% of non-dissociatives. In addition to this, the groups were split between drug-dependent and alcohol-dependent. The drug-dependent group only had 19% of the patients being monodependent of the dissociatives. That being said, there is no correlation between choice in drugs, just the number of drugs taken by the individual. Due to that fact, dissociatives were found to turn to drugs more often than their non-dissociative counterparts who turned to alcohol more often. In addition to this, dissociative patients were, let's go back. So, what does this mean? Well, it's interesting because, as we discussed earlier, think about it. 79% of them, right? Okay, 75.7% of them are suffering from dissociative amnesia, meaning that they don't remember significant things that are going on throughout their day, aka they're just gone. Like they're just not there. They're not fully there psychologically speaking. Yet, still, they're doing considerably more drugs than their non-dissociative counterparts. Right, well, I mean, their counterparts are also dissociative, right? But they're not really, they don't have dissociative disorders. They just suffer from some dissociation. Not all the time, though. Right? Okay, back to what I was saying. Dissociative patients were significantly less compliant with the program. Significantly more patients with dissociative disorders, which is 48.6%, including 4 patients with dissociative identity disorder, and 14 patients with dissociative disorder not otherwise specified, left the hospital before completing the treatment program, i.e., they deliberately stopped. The dropout rate was only 14.7% among patients in the non-dissociative disorder group. The difference was significant. I would theorize this is me talking, okay, that was just a quote. I would theorize this to be due to the fact of vacuity and lack of awareness of the dissociative a dissociative patient is suffering from. Dissociatives are less in their head and thus less aware of their mental state, causing impulsive choice and a denial of need for help. The reason I use terms such as running and withdrawal from an internal world are encapsulated by the speculation of the authors. They said, "We speculate that the transient but rapidly acting relief of drugs on the intermittent painful states seems to be more pertinent than that of alcohol for dissociative disorder patients. Dissociative patients are significantly more likely to be in treatment for substance use disorder than other psychiatric facilities. Quote, on the basis of present study, the conservative estimate of the frequency of dissociative disorders among patients with alcohol or substance abuse was 17.2%. This is a minimum percentage. This percent, compared to the general psych wards in Turkey of about 10.2, shows a distinct correlation to dissociatives and substance abusing tendencies compared to other problems with their mental health. But what are the predictors of substance use with dissociatives? In fact, all dissociative females have borderline personality disorder. 100% of the... I was like, bruh, that's insane. Compared to males, which was 65.4%. In the dissociative disorder group, more females, 36.4%, than males, which is 7.7%, had the most severe type of dissociative disorder, which is dissociative identity disorder. Borderline personality disorder diagnosed in all female patients considerably more than the males. Females overall have elevated levels of dissociative symptoms and were significantly more likely to have been sexually abused. Sexual abuse is one of the most common causes of dissociation, as it is extremely destructive to the psyche and often occurs at a younger age. Female dissociative patients, 54.5% of them, reported childhood sexual abuse more frequently than male patients, which was only 3.8%. Another predictor for dissociative disorder or substance abuse is history of a suicide attempt, with dissociative patients coming in at 75.7% compared to 29.3% of the non-dissociative counterparts. Finally, childhood emotional abuse was found as another strong predictor, with 62.2% of dissociatives being abused as children, compared to 22.7% of non-dissociatives. So, thus we can derive the fact that with these early life traumas, the adaptation that the brain makes to cope neurocognitively is not adequate to prevent the victim from suffering the repercussions of their experience. Strong encounters with trauma are directly related to substance use disorder. Estimates of co-occurring PTSD and substance use disorder vary, with the prevalence estimated in the range of 25 to 49% from Moselle, 2024. Trauma in adulthood seems significantly less likely to cause dissociative qualities or inattentiveness, but still can cause addiction very well. Okay. Let's review my original claims. This was before I did any research. These are just my thoughts. The brain is constantly adapting. I'll say true or somewhat or stuff like that. You'll know. The brain is constantly adapting. The brain adapts the most. This is my hypothesis for the first part. The brain adapts the most during the highest neuroplasticity, otherwise known as when you're a child. When one suffers traumas extensively as a child, the brain adapts to block out the issue, which was true. I based the blocking out part on the idea that when you are flooded with cortisol, you will biologically seek improvement, which is a notion based on the evolutionary psychology idea of horny is energized, hungry is energized, stress is energized, which I didn't really make it clear that that's why. Right, it's kind of hard to find, but I was mostly right. See, when one is a child, the conclusion is drawn that more or less the issue cannot be fixed externally, and thus the fix becomes internal, which is the brain blocking out issues. Unable to confirm, but the hypothesis still stands. How do people block out their issues within their heads? We find the answer in drug addicts, which is through running. Dissociation is a gap in brain function, as I understand it, which was not really confirmed. It might not be, I need to do some research, but I based that off the idea that they're, gone, and that most people that I've met that are kind of dissociative, what are you thinking about? They're like, nothing. And it shows that they're not thinking about anything in their lives. The brain ceases inactivity, and thus I exclude ADHD, as is hyperactivity. Turned out to be not true. The damage to the right hemisphere causes hyperactivity, and the damage is caused by trauma and a lack of development and mentalization. So I want it to be excluded from this. This creates the state of a person with dissociation. And then this is my one sentence claim. When suffering large trauma as a child, the brain adapts to function improperly to cope with high cortisol levels. This adaptation is either going to take the form of dissociative disorder if the trauma is severe, and ADHD if the trauma is less severe, which was true. This is the second part that I base this essay off of. Keep in mind, this is just rambling. This is not scientific fact. These were just ideas that I had that I wanted to research on. Why do people do drugs? Every drug that is taken, excluding common stimulants, inebriates the ability to think properly. This is where I got my claim earlier that drug addicts cope with the trauma by running. What do you think of when you think of a drug addict? Do you think of degenerates in your city streets nodding off on fentanyl on a Tuesday at 10 a.m.? I will find statistics later, which I didn't. Still, I'm very positive that there are more people addicted to downers than uppers in the U.S. Didn't confirm that either. Therefore, the people are running. Well, from what? A functional brain, clear-headedness, which was true. Before the turn of the century, sobriety was associated with thinking clearly, not a lack of inebriation. So, drug addiction is an addiction to not being able to think clearly. The only reason for people to do this is suffering. Plain and simple. There is no other benefit to be drawn from downers besides escape. What is to be explored is the idea that inattentive people also enjoy drugs more and crave them more and are more likely to be drug addicts, which I confirm to be true. I base this idea on various peoples I know, and also the idea that one negative cope isn't enough. You gain tolerance to your vices and want more and more. Escaping is the object of a vice. Of course, disassociating isn't a vice, but it achieves the same end. The one sentence claim. People who suffer from dissociation/inattentiveness are more likely to be addicts, which was true. This was just some idea at the end. A child becomes dissociative, an adult becomes an addict, which turned out to not be true. I mean, it's kind of true because PTSD causes addiction, even if it doesn't happen in childhood, but the child that's dissociative also becomes an addict. Oh, I said that immediately after. The sentence after that is the dissociative child becoming an adult is more likely to be an addict. Because the child has high neuroplasticity, the condition of vacuity stays as such. And the adult, being unable to change brain function internally, changes it externally. Which was true. That's it, guys. Man, this was long, bro. It's been 30 minutes. Long study. I hope that you guys can understand. Maybe I'll drop the link to... I might post this on Medium after I edit it, because I need to fix some grammar and stuff. And then you could actually view the essay and look at the stats and stuff, because I have some extra statistical stuff that I didn't read, because I'm not going to be like X equals, you know. But, yeah, that's it. I'm ending this. Appreciate it. Let me know any comments below.